in Gaza and ask, where were you, granddad? What did you do? And then, of course, there's Israeli aggression in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in so many other places. And finally, it was, attacking Iran with no provocation. So the the Israel has been the golden child of the United States and European countries for a long time, could never do wrong. And as the German Chancellor was saying, Israel does our dirty work for us. Does that dirty work including killing women and children? I mean, really, that was a horrendous statement. So it's not only President Trump who's making, you know, really terrible statements. There's also European politicians who are equally complicit in all of this. And it's very interesting. There's a Chinese analyst who made a very good comment. He said there are three losers in the whole conflict between um, Israel and Iran, and the three are Israel number one, the United States number two, and Iran. So if you look at Israel, the Israeli situation, they've lost equipment, they've lost the threat. The myth has been shattered of the invincibility of Israel. The United States has been hurt because ultimately the US had to come to save the Israelis in the hammering that they were getting. And as far as the Iranians are concerned, they now know for certain that they are vulnerable. So this story is not, it hasn't ended, just because President Trump said ceasefire. Ceasefire is, you can always kick off conflicts. If you look at deeply divided societies, I mean, I negotiated a a ceasefire between two parties in my country of birth, Sri Lanka, between the Tamil Tigers and the Sri Lankan government, two unilateral ceasefires, which broke down after a few years, and there was all hell that broke loose. So these are things that we need to be cognizant of, and using violence and using military force should be the last option. But unfortunately, it's the go-to mantra or the method that the United States has used time and time again since the end of World War II, which is a pity because we should actually use diplomacy to make things work. And during my time in Northern Ireland, I worked with Senator Mitchell and General de Chastelain, and my task was, very focused on decommissioning of weapon stockpiles, and also working with the family members of the IRA and UVF. And I actually sent these family members to a war zone, a hot war zone, together with my grad students. And when they were there, they forgot whether they were Protestants or Catholics. They all became Irish because when the 185 millimeter artillery was going off, they were actually scared. And they came back and they told their folks, look, war is a bad business, which is what I had told them before. I said, you don't go to work and then come back in the night, you put a balaclava on, you go and kneecap somebody, you put a pipe bomb. That's not war. So war is a terrible scourge. And we are somehow sanitized because we get to see these things on our screens, and we are not immersed in it. And I always tell my students, this kind of experiential knowledge cannot be gleaned or gathered from libraries. You have to be in the field to see the horrors of war. And it's terrible. I mean, if you look at the number of journalists that have been killed by the Israelis, they are the total. It's greater than all the journalists who were killed in World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War, and the Iraq War. Can you
Mm,
imagine that?
I think it's
Because
awful. But let me ask Dr. De Silva if I can bring Josie Matthews into our conversation. I introduced Josie at the top of the hour. Josie, I asked Dr. De Silva, who I'm grateful for being on our program today, what are some of the consequences and the ramifications, both short and long term, of the unilateral action taken by the United States in, if you will, ending or badly damaging the Iran nuclear program?
Well, good afternoon to you and Professor De Silva, and thank you for the opportunity to join you from Johannesburg today. I think that I mean I totally agree with Professor De Silva's assessment, but I want to take it even further and ask Professor to come at it from a different angle, because we've not heard or seen a great deal. But Professor, where does China fit into all this at this particular stage? Because a lot of that focus of the United States in more recent times has been on the Indo-Pacific region. And you know that region well, you know China well, but where does China sit in all of this? And what 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 is the short term and the long term prospects of some kind of resolution of this situation? Or are we now entering a period of relative uncertainty?
I think it will be uncertain for a long time to come. But if you look at China, China has used the combat between Israel and Iran by monitoring everything. So they had a L-int ship docked in Bandar Abbas, that is electronic intelligence vessel with all these radars on top of them, and they were watching every single flight, every single missile, and the movements of the Fifth Fleet. And they were working. They had an undersea link to another vessel that the Iranians had, so they were working in tandem. And whenever an incident happened, there was a team, a big team in Shanghai that would be monitoring this within 5 seconds. So, as far as the Chinese were concerned, they were using what was going on, a hot war situation for 12 days, and looking to see how effective the F-35s were, etc., and how they are, how their equipment, because they've been supporting Iran for a long time, would compare against Western equipment. Now, they had done this previously in the air war between Pakistan and India, where the Chinese J-10Cs actually fared pretty well because of the Chinese air-to-air missiles. So, so similarly, I think China will step into anywhere that the United States withdraws from, whether it's in the United Nations, whether it is with regard to trade, or whether it regards to military matters. And China today has the largest navy. They are building capital vessels much faster than the US can now. And they are going to achieve some kind of parity on the technology front, especially with regard to missiles and etc. and ICBMs, whatever. So that's where China sits. So whenever people say in Pakistan start talking about, oh, what did the US do? What did the US, what are they saying? I always say, what are the Chinese saying? Because the Chinese are hugely invested in Pakistan, hugely. And I can give you a little anecdote. When the big earthquake happened, yeah, I was at that time in a Wall Street firm, and I had gone to help a brigadier general whom I knew. Hundred of his family had died, and we had asked some Chinese companies to send tents and lanterns. So when they came, and we of course distributed this in Pakistan, going by helicopter, etc., etc. The Chinese gentleman who led the expedition didn't speak a word of English, and he asked through the interpreters, should we bring food? And I said, no, there are hundreds of thousands of people affected. How can you bring food for all of them? He said, no, no, food for us.
Hmm.
So I said, don't worry about it. So for 2 weeks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner was in a different Chinese restaurant in Rawalpindi. Now, Rawalpindi is a cantonment city. It's where the Pakistani military operates out of. And knowing that there were that many Chinese restaurants meant you saw the close ties between the Pakistani military and the Chinese and their Chinese counterparts. You didn't have to do great spook stuff to figure that out.
Hmm.
So these are some of the things that you can see that China has been, but they're quiet. They're not bombastic like the United States. They don't make a big noise, but they're present. And so these are the things that we need to be cognizant of. But unfortunately, President Trump has surrounded himself with people who do not, who are not professionals, who are incapable of figuring any of these things out, and therefore it is to the deficit of the United States that we don't have capable people, at the helm of some of the most important, um, you know, governmental entities in the country at the moment. I mean, if you look at this 22-year-old Clark, who is supposed to be head of counterterrorism in the United States, he has absolutely he has zero experience in the CT field.
Hmm.
So how's he going to keep the U.S. safe? It's really ridiculous. I mean, he only
Let me
got the
just
job because he's loyal to President Trump.
let me just add that I'm an avid news watcher here in the United States, Holsey, and we have about 2 minutes before the break, maybe about a minute and 30 seconds. No one here has reported, as Dr. De Silva just articulated, on the Chinese angle and what they were doing observing the conflict. Holsey, I'll give you the last minute and 15 seconds before we come forward.
Well, I think, I mean, it opens up a much wider question, which I'd like Professor De Silva to perhaps address, because we must also be looking at a post-Trump world in 2029, after what is now happening or is likely to happen, what we've seen in the last 100 days. But what do we start to look at in terms of the future, in particular, the future of the multipolar world that we've known? And now that there'll be new alliances, Europe will look at America differently. It has already started to do so, as will China and Russia. So what are the lessons that we're learning to prepare us for 2029 in a post-Trump era?
Well, I know that in about 1 minute, I hope Dr. De Silva can come and sum it up because at the hard 30, I've got to let everyone go. But we do have two more 10-minute segments. You can get us started now, Dr. De Silva. You have about
Okay,
30 seconds.
so it's I mean, it's really a reckoning for the United States. Having somebody like President Trump at the helm, it's a reckoning for us. And the chickens have come home to roost. There's a lot that we need to discuss to unpack this. But if I may say so, that it's just another symptom that this country, this American empire, is actually in decline, despite all the hyperbole and all the things, all the lies that the mainstream media seems to be spewing.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. So, our very special guest is our contributor, regular contributor, Jose Matthews, and Dr. Pranaka De Silva is going to unpack America in decline. And yes, increasingly, the monitoring role that China plays in observing American conflicts. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Until we come forward. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Our very special guests in this hour include Hulsey Matthews, who is the co-founder of a firm that's based in Johannesburg, South Africa. Hulsey has over 30 years of experience in the public and private sector. We're also joined by the experience director with a demonstrated history of working in think tanks, industry, and academia, an advisor to Kofi Annan, who was the Secretary General of the United Nations. We've been talking about what's going on in the Middle East. But most importantly, I think Dr. De Silva touched upon something that I want him to unpack over the next few minutes, that America is in decline. Dr. De Silva, that's not something we hear every day in the United States. We hear over and over again that Trump is making America great again. Today, all of America's markets are up, even though Donald Trump has withdrawn today from trade talks with Canada, promising in 72 hours a massive new sweeping regimen of tariffs because the trade talks have broken down. And so, this idea that America is in decline may be something that the rest of the world is seeing and experiencing, but it is not what the media is feeding to the United States on a day to day basis. And therefore, when you say that America is in decline, the average American probably says, what is he talking about? Help us understand that from an
Yeah.
outside perspective.
So let us go back to Trump 1.0 when he started hollowing out the Department of State. You know, it's an august body. And I went to meet Ambassador Dan Fried, who was the top US expert on Russia, hands on. And I went to see him in the upper floors when he was packing his boxes because he had been fired by President Trump in his first term. So when I was downstairs, the security guards were saying, "You can skateboard up there, sir. There's nobody in the offices." And they've been, Trump 2.0 has just exacerbated it. I mean, where do you want to start? With Doge and all these kind of crazy antics of Elon Musk, who was a sidekick until recently, and the dismantling of the State Department, of US aid, uh, of the Department of Agriculture, of NOAA, putting incompetent people at the helm, the EPA, you name it, the Department of Education, for God's sake. And then he starts a fight with Harvard University, stopping them from getting international students who are the bread and butter of this, the education industry, higher education in the world. United States is like number one. And why do you want to destroy these things by attacking these institutions? So if you look far and wide, you don't have to look at the casino economy and look at the markets. You have to look at the 300,000 plus people who've been fired, who lost their jobs. I had a friend of mine in the CIA who was very senior in USA. He held the rank of brigadier general. He was a mission director with lots of experience in Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, etc., etc. He was fired. Where are you going to get that institutional memory and knowledge? So if you destroy, so the United States is being destroyed from within. This is what happened to the Roman Empire. They were destroyed from within. So that's what we are seeing. So don't look at the casino economy and all these silly graphs and numbers going up and down. Every time there's a little histrionic, either it goes down or goes up. It's a casino economy. United States does not really manufacture anything apart from weapons. Okay, truly. And the lie that we are going to bring these things back, restart the coal industry, etc., etc., it's not true. But if you tell a lie often and louder, people tend to believe this. They're saying it so often. Lies, blatant lies. You have to fact check everything that President Trump is telling the general populace. right?
Mhm.
And we all know the previous two attempts of tariffs ended up in disaster. In this country, tariffs, any economist worth his or her salt knows that tariffs are a dreadful, you know, tactic that will destroy your own economy. That's why I asked, where do you want me to start? From the Heritage Foundation, all the terrible things that they're doing. um there's nowhere to begin, because they're doing so many things at the same time. Sometimes it's difficult for us to keep track.
Mm, mm.
So that's the other thing. They're doing things at speed and across the board everywhere. So it's very difficult. And I think they're going so fast because they know there will be a come to Jesus time come November 2026.
Jose, we've got about 3 minutes and 45 seconds in this segment, and we'll come back with the final 10-minute segment. Jose, your thoughts, your questions for Dr. De Silva? Jose, I think your mic is muted.
Beg your pardon. Professor De Silva, just picking up on what you've just said, I want to just take a quote from Secretary of State Rubio at his confirmation hearing. And he said, I quote, "The post-war global order is not just obsolete, it is now being used against us." My professors, when they would give us essay assignments at Harvard, would then, the tagline at the end would be discuss. What would be your response to Secretary Rubio, who I must say is almost like he's now, 360-degree turn from when he was in the Senate to now when he's in the State Department. But your comment on that, is it being used against the United States?
Dr. De Silva, we have a minute and 45 seconds before
Okay,
the
so the United States is its own enemy. People like Trump, the MAGA movement, these are the enemies of the United States. The enemy is not outside of the borders of this country. The enemies are within, and it's a culture of ignorance. It's a post-truth society. Social media, of course, complements all of this, and it's horrendous. And if you look at the universities, the colleges, if we don't educate our people, we will not succeed.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. When we come forward, Jose Matthews and Dr. Pertaki De Silva will continue to be our guest for the final segment. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Everyone within the range of our listening voices know that we are trying something new this week on KBLA Talk 1580 as we hope to move to national and maybe even international syndication. Yesterday was Thought Provoking Thursdays. Today is Fat Meat Fridays. And the leader of our program in the next hour is none other than the creator of the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, Miss Gina Towns. She'll be back in a few minutes to bring us more on that. But Hulsey Matthews, worldwide with Hulsey Matthews. Hulsey, I can't begin to tell you what a contribution you have made to my 6 months of debuting on the radio. This is a international perspective that we don't get for those of us who cover the daily news and the daily grind and the chaos of Donald Trump. We have about 10 minutes left in this segment. In fact, we have 8 minutes, and it is a hard stop at the top of the hour. You've begun a line of questioning Dr. De Silva that I think is very, very important. Please take your time, continue to educate our audience on that line of questioning, Hulsey Matthews of Dr. De Silva.
Thank you very much, um, Dr. De Silva. I think one of the things that um, Jesse's father, Reverend Jackson, would often say to us is that the discussion will be about between the United States and Russia, and then you forget the majority of the world that's African or in the Indian subcontinent. You are you're from that region, from the Indian subcontinent region. Most recently, I know you were very involved, directly, indirectly, in the discussions between Pakistan and India a few months ago, when it looked like we were on the brink of another catastrophic situation in that region. How do you see the evolution of India-Pakistan relations, and where do you see Africa in particular going forward, which it seems to have now become part of the transactional diplomatic push of this administration in its search for critical minerals, particularly from the Congo? How do you see that, and how do you see that playing out? Firstly, India, Pakistan, Africa as a whole and as a continent, and then the transactional nature of U.S. foreign policy during this period, with a particular emphasis, even with Ukraine, on critical minerals in particular and their importance to the United States.
So before I go there are two important things that I have to say. That Trump is using DEI as a racist tool to attack people of color. That's number one.
Mm.
And number two is the cruelty of this administration. And you can see that by their defunding or attempt to defund Medicaid, which provides medical insurance and care to the United States most vulnerable people who are living on the borderline of poverty and who are elderly. So that's what I wanted to say, and I hope that everybody is fully cognizant of this, because this needs to be combated, this racism and the attempt to defund Medicaid. Having said that, let's move to India Pakistan. So India Pakistan situation, you have to look at the history of it. This is the time of Mountbatten and the British colonial Raj, which actually partitioned the continent, the subcontinent, putting India in the middle and having a East Pakistan and a West Pakistan. I mean, it's so ludicrous. So they fought a number of wars, and it's very, this situation, it's not going to end. It and both countries are using nuclear deterrence, but it's not along the lines of what President Trump was saying. Oh, I went and mediated. No, there's a hotline between India and Pakistan, and the Indian military and the Pakistani military. They know when to walk it back, because they're both nuclear armed countries. So that's the first thing that I'd like to say. With regard to to the scramble for resources and minerals, rare minerals in Africa and the Congo in particular, there are a lot of bad actors out there. So you have the United States trying very hard. You have Indians everywhere from India. You have Chinese everywhere. So these are the three countries that are really fighting to get control of these rare earth minerals, and and also bauxite for aluminum. So these are all things that are going on in Africa. And unfortunately, because we live in a transactional world, the people the people, African people, decision makers and miners and others, these people are also complicit, as during colonial times, of raping their own countries, not for not for the welfare and well-being of the people at large. So this whole notion of the greater good is out of the window. Who works for the greater good? If you think politicians are businessmen, really, to be honest, politics is a vocation. They get into this, and the corrupt practices, it's unbelievable. If you look at the lobbying that's happening in the United States, it's all about corruption, it's all about money. If you look at senators and congressmen and women, when they started and when they ended their careers, if you look at their net worth, you just have to follow the money, and then you will see what's plain as day. So this is also sadly happening in Africa, and also in other countries, in Brazil and in other BRICS countries. So this is it's a scramble for resources. However, the rare earths, the control of rare earths, the majority of rare earths that are mined in the world are in China. So they have a death grip on it, and that's why the United States is on the back foot when it negotiates with China, because you don't you don't have it. You make all these noises, but we know that if you want to start something in the mining sector, it takes years for you to have proven resources, till you can get it up to a stage where it's actually usable in industry. It's not the case. So, I mean, coltan is another mineral that's used for in all our cell phones, etc. That's in the eastern Kivu province, and so these are all things that are. It's a sad thing, It's what they call the resource curse.
Dr. De Silva, the hour goes by so quickly, and I can't wait to welcome you back. Hulsey is a regular contributor on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. I can't thank you enough for being here. You brought tremendous wealth to our program, a knowledge base that is unmatched. Can't wait to have you back. And Hulsey, I look forward to seeing you again sometime very soon. I'm Jesse Jackson
Thank
Jr.
you.
Listening to the Jesse Jackson
Thank
Jr.
you.
Show. This is Fat Meat Friday, and I'll see you just after the break.
More power to you.
Thank you, Dr. De Silva. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., live on Facebook, live on YouTube, live on KBLA, and live on multiple programs. Um, I want to introduce our second part of the program, Fat Meat Fridays. The executive producer and creator of the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, hosting Gina Towns with her experience as and skill set. She came up with this idea that with these 10 hours, we could bring the highest level of professionalism to radio. And she is a recording artist, a charted artist, has worked at Hampton University, graduated from Hampton University, and recently graduated from Princeton Theological Seminary. Gina, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
And thank you, Jesse Jackson Jr. Great to be with you on Fat Meat Friday.
It's always a pleasure. Listen, I got up this morning, Gina, and right in my newsfeed on social media was Ted Williams unpacking the Mamdani race in New York. And I said to myself, what are the chances that he's our guest this afternoon? And there's so much that I know you want to unpack from the week. But why don't we begin by introducing our regular contributor, Ted Williams. Ted, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Ted, I think you might still be muted. And while Ted is getting his mic together, Gina?
Yes. There was a lot going on in the news today. I just
there we go.
There's
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderful.
Ted Williams is an educator, an actor, an author who is a graduate of Rutgers University, the University of Chicago, the Northern Seminary. He has his doctorate in ministry. He is also a teacher, a political scientist, and most importantly, he's Gina's best friend, and he's my best friend, and he is a regular contributor on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Yes.
Fridays on our show belong to Gina Towns. This is Fat Meat Fridays. Ted, you were raising hell this morning on social media about the Mamdani election, and I want to turn it over to Gina.
Yes, brother. So first of all, now I consider myself your audience's best friend as well. So we expanding that, and I'm with you. But brother, there's a lot happening around the world. This election in New York is really groundbreaking, right? It is a political earthquake to get a 33-year-old Democratic socialist to beat out the former governor of New York on a platform of free buses, free childcare, 200,000 new affordable homes. I don't even want to call him pro-Palestinian, but he's pro-equality, if you will, in the Israeli-Palestinian peace. Yeah. This is crazy. And I think it's going to have a ripple effect across the country. And we should really be paying attention to this. And MAGA should be paying attention to this because they ought to be scared.
Well, what's very interesting about that, Ted, is yesterday in the news also was the meeting that some of the billionaires had with Andrew Cuomo following this election. And they are going to still support him, and they're going to still try to push him forward. And what that is going to do to the electorate, besides enrage them, is very interesting. Something we'll have to watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that I'm scared. I'm scared to death about that. I see a division in the Democratic Party that may not be repairable if Mamdani is not respected as a Democratic nominee.
And what a sore loser. I mean, at the end of the day, Mario, we all love you doing Andrew. Sorry, I love Mario too.
Andrew, Mario, you know, they all.
It's almost like Trump when he was on his reality TV show and everybody liked Trump. And so we love the Cuomo family. However, it's just time to sit down. There was just far too much baggage that came forward. And the 13 women, I think, was the thing that took it over the edge for Cuomo. But you also have to keep in mind that there's a new generation. The new Gen Z, gotta love them. I love Gen Z. I love the millennials, but I love Gen Z because they want something different for this world. They're still idealistic and they aim to have it.
Yeah, think about this, so and being, Chicagoans, being Chicagoans, New York and Chicago are kind of like sister cities in that way, right? And so, for me, as someone who lives and works in the city of Chicago, I say if New York can figure out the affordability question, we can figure out the affordability question. If New York can figure out the affordability question, Los Angeles can figure out the affordability
I
question.
like that. I like that.
3 largest cities in the country, New York, LA, and Chicago. And so what he's doing is saying we don't have to have politics as usual. We don't have to compromise what we want. We can go for what we want. And I tell you, I and the younger people, to your point, Gina, they are unapologetic in going after what they want. I think those of us who are a little more seasoned have a lot to learn from them.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. This is Fat Meat Fridays with our host, Gina Towns. We have a very special guest in Ted Williams. When we come forward, we will continue to unpack New York and find out what else is hiding behind that big red apple. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. You're listening to Fat Meat Fridays on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Our host is none other than Gina Towns, and our very special guest is Ted Williams. Gina, quick question for you, and then I'll let you and Ted have at it. What does the message say to young voters across the country when they vote for a candidate, the candidate wins, the Democratic billionaires, millionaires, Wall Street, independent expenditure people all head over and say, no, we want the guy who just lost to become the party nominee again, or Eric Adams? What does it say to you?
It says a little bit something about why we call this show Fat Meat Friday. And that has to do, and well, reflectivity is the name of the show that, I'm a part of, but the whole piece of it is Fat Meat Friday. So we're going to put this right where you can get it. If I tell you something in the beginning of a So I just want to go, let me finish. They're going to get frustrated. And either they're going to leave the party and form their own, or they're going to withdraw from the process. And I think they understand that this is the system and they cannot withdraw from the political process, because you see times when they've participated and times when they have not. But we really have a responsibility in Generation X to say, listen, this is what we need to do. Here's the history that you need to know, and to help along with the plan. That wisdom has to serve the energy and the zealous.
May I say this? I appreciate that shout out to Gen X, because no one talks about Gen X. And I am grateful. And I do think that Gen X has a unique role to play in all of this, because we're kind of couched right in the middle. We're a little older, but we have enough history. I always tell people that, the Gen X group, they're young enough to do something, old enough to know something, young enough to still do something. And I think that we have a unique role to play in this situation. So I tell you, now it's interesting because you talked about young people, Brother Jesse, and the young Republicans are upset. I just saw this this article here that they want to try to deport Mamdani because they think that he's going to destroy their beloved city of New York. And what we must understand is that is classism speaking. Because for some people, New York is a wonderful place. For some people, Chicago. For some people, Los Angeles. But for the masses of people who have a hard time making ends meet after working 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and still have a hard time paying rent, these cities and this country have to do better. And that's what this election represents.
Ted, he wins in a democracy fair and square. He gets the most votes. And then the next day, the base racist politics deport him come into play. I mean, Melania Trump. Barron Trump wasn't born in the United States, and neither was Melania. Does that mean you deport them?
Yeah.
Gina?
Well, maybe, right? I mean, yeah, I didn't start the move, but hey, I was, maybe that's the answer. But
I just think too, Ted, that people have to be reminded about that. It is that we have always been a nation of give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. We don't say the Pledge of Allegiance in school anymore. We don't teach that kind of American patriotism. And even though for Black people in this country, it's not necessarily our history. We've had to fight tooth and nail from the very beginning because we did not come to the country in the same way. We still have to be, and Martin Luther King was very, very exact about, in a struggle, you must show your patriotism. And therefore, we require that of everyone else who is a citizen of the United States and a patriot of the United States to respect that. I think we have to command that respect by being who we need to be in this hour. That also gets to a level of spirituality, which I was really happy about Ted being on here too, because that's a character issue.
Yeah, it is. And I think as you all speak, this speaks to the American character. We have long since really the beginning of our journey in this country, 1619, but 1776, officially the starting of the country, have always wrestled with this question: what does it mean to be an American? Who's an American? Who does it belong to? And the country has had a moral crisis from day one, because we essentially committed genocide against the indigenous people, brought millions of the enslaved here, and essentially committed genocide against our people as well. And now we're deporting people that are from countries that are brown countries, because there is this narrative that to be an American means that you are from one community, you worship one way, you talk one way, you look one way. And that is not the reality of America. And until we deal with this, and I know, our host here, Brother Congressman, is a scholar on, Civil War and what that has meant for us. But we have not ended this battle. When you have a president who just last week said we want to rename military bases for Confederate generals, we have not ended the Civil War ideologically. And this wrestling with what it means to be an American is still at the center of American politics.
Gina, let me pivot for a second, because Ted has touched upon a couple of things, and you certainly have. This has been a very rough week. Every week can be summarized by being rough under Donald Trump, and it seems like the only response that we have to the massive influx of money, the overwhelming badgering of the media. I understand the University of Virginia president resigned today, apparently not being forthright with the Department of Justice about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ted, in the last hour, we had Dr. De Silva on our program, who was an advisor to Kofi Annan. And he's not even in the United States, but he was so clear on the racist nature of Donald Trump's program and the MAGA movement that it gives me pause, because while some of us may not be as clear on it here in the United States, the global community is absolutely clear on what Donald Trump is doing. Gina?
Your guests in the first hour really laid out where the goats could get it, what the truth is, and the truth that everyone else can see. It's almost like we're the emperor with no clothes, still trying to impress everybody, be the strong man. And that is exactly what I saw last week. Whatever the reports are that come back from the bombing in Iran, nobody knows the full details of it, but it was, obliteration. And it's so funny because it's only like, you guys know one word. It's one big, beautiful bill. It's obliterated like 15 times during a press conference. Nothing was necessarily obliterated. You may not be able to get in there, but people around the world and even across the country listen to this. And it's almost like the media cannot question anything anymore. And that is the beginning of the crumbling of a democracy. And even Professor De Silva in the last hour talked about this is the destruction that befell Rome.
The decline. Ted?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I think when you mention the media, the culpability is very clear. The president of CBS during Donald Trump's first election said, that Donald Trump was horrible for America, but he was great for their ratings. And so, as you see, what's going on is Donald Trump is making these media companies a lot of money, because whether you love him or you hate him, he is compelling and engaging. And people want to hear what he has to say. Even people, on our side of the aisle who are frustrated. Did you hear what he said again? Oh my gosh. I got to read this. I have to see what this man is. What are you doing? I want to follow him on social media. I want to know what the heck he's talking about. Well, that makes our profit-driven media a lot of money. So of course, they're not going to challenge the things that need to be challenged for this democracy to survive. And the rest of the world sees it. And I just hope and pray, Dr. King said clearly that the triplets of racism, militarism, and materialism would ultimately be our downfall. And Donald Trump represents all three.
About 6 minutes left in this segment. Earlier in the week, Gina, Ron Lester, the Dean of African American Pollsters, was on the program. Again, it looks like people power versus the money in politics mattered in New York. When the people came together, we were able to stop the massive influx of money and billionaire influence. But he put a particular thumbtack on Black men and 25% of them who are not voting. Gina, we need that we need them added back to the coalition.
We do. Like him or not, Barack Obama was able to put that coalition together. Bill Clinton was able to put that coalition together. And it really, unfortunately, it's almost like people get comfortable when they think things are going well and they don't engage, they don't vote in the midterm elections, they don't get involved in school board elections. And this is something very specific that if you study, if you take a look and see the plan as it has unfolded following Barack Obama's second term, you see school board elections, you see, municipal elections that mattered to building an infrastructure under what has become a national phenomena, if you will, and is girding Project 2025 and all of that. This is a 60-year plan. And it's very interesting. I was listening to a program on YouTube this morning that was talking about Gary, Indiana. And of course, that always brings up for me the 1972 convention when Black people convened and there were over 10,000 people who came to set an agenda. And anytime someone wants to set an agenda for themselves, it always, and especially Black people, it always gets knocked down by racism, by greed. And so I think those are the things that we have to really still deal with in the United States of America. And until we deal with them, and people are afraid. Once you insert fear into the conversation, the language changes, the messaging changes. And so we have to figure that piece out.
Ted, I was surprised by the optimism that Mamdani brought forward, even in his victory speech. It wasn't bitter. It was just as statesmanlike and profound. It almost seemed in that moment nationally that his message did not just resonate in New York, but it resonated from sea to shining sea.
Yeah, well, Dr. King also said that we can't have a first-class nation with second-class citizens. So people realize that you should not live in a country where people work 40 hours a week and can't pay their bills. And so this is what he was talking about and what he was pushing. And I think that message, it's time for it. I don't know where we go if we don't have candidates that recognize that. The most popular president in American history, arguably, was FDR, who died in his fourth term. And he was probably the most progressive president we've had as well. Those policies are actually very popular if you look back at history and understand it.
Gina?
Well, I think you bringing up FDR is right on time, because before that, but after his administration, all of a sudden it's only 2 terms. But he was so successful in turning the nation around, and people who thought that they weren't going to like him, you have to like the programs. And if you look at the things that have been under attack, while it does hurt minorities, while it does hurt Black people specifically, it certainly hurts a lot of rural white people. And that's what people don't understand, is they're going to always be collateral damage when there's an agenda that's suited just for the rich and the aristocracy. Healthcare, education, those things have always been an issue.
Ted, I've always seen public service. Well, I should share with everyone. Here's a big secret. Gina's a minister, Ted Williams is a minister, and I'm a minister. We all are seminary educated people. So we have boundaries in our conversation for the kind of world that we believe that the world should actually be. So let me preface it by saying that whatever became of the idea of a person who wanted to serve, and where servant leadership, and we have just about 2 minutes before the hard stop. Ted, help us with people who wanted to serve, as opposed to this businessman, take what you can, it's my time to get my piece of it. And I'm sensing that's becoming a more prevalent American ethos.
Yeah, I think capitalism, racism, the destruction of America, they're all sort of intertwined. And I think the more that we have moved away from a sense of service, sense of community, this is where we're headed. In ancient Greece, democracy essentially had people serving. Everyone in the community served for a period of time, a limited period of time. You were on the legislature for 4 years, and the next person was the next person. And that really is what democracy is about. And if we don't do that, I know we'll come back and talk about this more, but really to lead is to serve. Maybe we should stop saying when people leave political positions that they step down from some position. Maybe we should start saying in service, they actually stepped up.
I like that. I have to remind people historically that the history of humankind is a history of unfreedom. The idea of freedom is relatively new in human history. We fight over it. We struggle with it. But over time, The longest period of human history from the beginning of time to nearly the present, unfreedom, has been more characteristic of human history than freedom. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, more of Fat Meat Friday with Gina Towns and Ted Williams. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on Fat Meat Fridays, where we are learning to discern week to week, generation to generation, with the CEO of 519 Productions and the co-producer of an Emmy-winning documentary on Hampton University, one of the wonders of the world, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, as well as the executive producer and director of the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, Gina Towns, and our very special guest, Ted Williams. Gina, take it away. You had something you wanted to follow up on Ted with.
I sure did. Ted started rattling off some labels, if you will, some isms, schisms. And I had one of the guests that we had this week, I believe Atiba Madian was on Wednesday. And he and I had had a conversation before the show, and he also brought it up during the show. And that is that we are so quick to label people. And I thought about that with the new Democratic,
Mamdani.
because that's who he is. He is the Democratic nominee for the mayor of New York, like it or not. He calls himself a democratic socialist, and so did Dr. King, for that matter. And I think there's a lot of people. Jesus is a democratic socialist, if you want to give him a political title, because when you believe in a democracy where people are treated fairly, because that's what we get to fair treatment, we get to equal treatment, we get to one doesn't have more than the other. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit because Ted brought that issue up. Now, one of those isms, which is racism, drives a lot of the problems that we have right now. So I'm going to let you guys pick up on that.
Oh, absolutely. So, I love what you said about labels. And I do want to harken back quickly to something you said earlier, and I'm going to come back around to this. You mentioned Gary, Indiana. I just want to say I was there this week celebrating the 16th year anniversary of the death of the King of Pop. And, that economic piece there, there's so much to talk about. I'd love to talk more about that. But I know Brother Jesse's a fan. I'm a huge fan. And I just think we got to take a moment to remember the greatness of that legacy and also what we can do in our communities, what needs to be done, because places like Gary need economic development. And so anyway, so the question about these isms, particularly around socialism, you got to think about this. Social Security, unemployment compensation, Medicare, Medicaid, you name it. You name the government program that's popular, on paper you could say it's socialism. In fact, I was actually in a debate with a right-wing colleague who tried to make the argument that we didn't need things like government-funded fire departments and police departments and things like that. And what I'm suggesting is that in a sensible society, what do you, because that's the libertarian philosophy at the end of the day, by the way. I mean, and this is what I try to hold our right-leaning friends to. If you don't want the government, fine. Let's take it all away. Yeah. It's every man for himself. Let's pull away all the government things that you benefit from. And the reality is that they're disingenuous. We all benefit from some level of government support, whatever ism you want to call it. And in a peaceful, equal society, you better hope the government is protecting those at the bottom, because if not, we have something that is much darker and scarier than what we'd like to live in.
Mamdani won on promises that he made. I'm not so sure that financially or fiscally he can keep them. Free bus rides, bringing down the rent from $6,000 to something manageable or subsidized by the city. He ran on the idea of some elements of free healthcare. I'm convinced if I ran for office in 3/4 of the United States today, I'd run on a free air conditioning unit for everybody. Now, tell me why that wouldn't be popular, because it's hot as hell out here. Yesterday, I felt like I was walking down the street and I saw 3 people walking. I thought it was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So it was that hot, and it still is that hot. Ted, our environment is part of this conversation.
It is. And we have, Lord have mercy, we have a president that appointed an EPA director who said when he was appointed, I remember this clearly, that his job would be to increase profits for the auto industry as the head of the Environmental Protection Agency. So we recognize and we know that President Trump has rolled back all kinds of Biden-era protections, initiatives around solar power, et cetera, et cetera. We have to understand that all of these things are connected. If we sell our souls, right? What good is it for a man to gain the whole world and yet lose his or forfeit his very soul? If we do that, our planet will not survive. Our communities will not survive. And I think what we're doing here by being a force, whatever ism, as Gina talked about, we stand for, that we are labeled, or particularly in our faith commitments, by being people who stand against this. I think this may sound a little bit overblown. We really are saving the world, folks. And I'm here for that fight because
Absolutely.
I'm not going to sit back and watch these things occur.
Right.
Mm.
That's part of reflectivity, is that, we reflect on where we are. We reflect on what we believe in. We reflect on who we want to be and how we need to get there. And on Wednesday, as I said, Atiba brought that up to my attention. And then yesterday we had a guest, Johnny Mack, um, Straight Facts with Johnny Mack. I think we're going to change the name of that show on Thought Provoking Thursdays to Profundity because this man brought so much. It was just almost surreal because he said, we are our own answer. We are our own answer to either we destroy everything or we are our own answer to saving the planet, to loving one another. Um, and so that's where we get to that, what you just said, is that it's important for us to not lose or forfeit everything. And back to Gen Z once again, they really do not like the model of capitalism. I'm one of those people that says if we have a system and structure, let's try to fix it. And don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Um, what do you say about
Yeah,
that?
I'll tell you, Gina. Let me say this. I am a person of faith and hope. Right? Faith, hope, and love. These things last. They survive. But I got to tell you, empires are cyclical. You look
Yes.
throughout world history, empires, they come and they go. And the time of an empire that exploits the earth, exploits people, pushes individualism, does not believe in justice, that empire probably is not going to last. And maybe it should not last.
Yes.
I know we love what we have. I love what we have. But I will tell you, maybe there may be a time where the world requires and demands us to be in a completely different model than what this is. And
Mhm.
this model may not survive if it does not change in that way. And I mean, I have to live with that, and we have to understand that completely.
We have about a minute and 15 seconds left in this segment. Gina, let me ask you a question. The role that Black women played in the Kamala Harris campaign gave much evidence that every one of these elections, whether it's Mondani in New York or whether it is the Democratic primary in 2026, Black women are going to be raising their voices. What are you hearing from Black women?
Black women are angry. Let's go back to Tenacious Tuesday with Barbara Arnwine. On the grind with Barbara Arnwine. I mean, Barbara, I was laughing because she was saying everything that I was feeling, and then I sat there in that moment, and I thought every woman, black or white, who believes in the good, the greater good, who rallied around something better, something different, um, is angry.
Mm.
And I've heard many black women say, I just need to take a break. I just need a spa day. Give me a second and I will regroup myself. But certainly, if you did not hear Barbara Arnwine on Tuesday, please go back and download so that you can feel a sense of waiting to exhale.
A lot of white men are talking. A lot of white men run the Democratic Party. A lot of white men are pundits. A lot of people are talking, but still, this party is run by African American women. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on Bat Meat Fridays with Gina Towns and our special guest, Ted Williams, when we come forward. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on Fat Meat Fridays with Gina Towns on her Signal event. I'm going to get all of this worked out when I get better at this. Reflectivity. Gina likes to reflect upon some of the things that are in front of us. And our very special guest in this hour is none other than actor, author, professor, teacher, Reverend Ted Williams. Now, as I get used to this, Gina, I'm going to pitch it to you for obvious reasons. I'm kind of the timekeeper here. Gina has a question or two that she wants to ask of you, Ted, but I want Ted to close us out with the final 4 minutes of hope. We have about 6 minutes until that point. Gina?
Well, really, it's kind of for both of you. It really hinges upon Ted talking about the empires, and then you, Jesse, with your book, The Finger of God. And it was not meant to be this way. I think we even discussed Roosevelt today. The first 6 presidents understood something about who they were supposed to be in the whole scheme of the United States of America. And there's a reason why our preamble says, we, the people, in order to form a more perfect union. I think when we can have things, and let's just even take the marriage document, for example. Everybody signs up for one thing, but if you don't have the right document that you both are working off of and everybody agrees to, then you don't do well at it. And so I just want to put that out there, because when you go back and look at Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution and who the president is supposed to be, because the president obviously sets the tone. We see Donald Trump, he has not had a problem setting a tone at all. So what do we say about what we were supposed to be in the beginning, getting off track, and the possibilities of us getting back on track?
Yeah, so I would speak to the dichotomy that is the American story. America, on the one hand, was a place of great freedom, great hope, and really where the Puritans and Pilgrims thought that they would build this new Jerusalem, this city on a hill. Simultaneously, I think it's a bit of irony that 1619 is the time that the first 20 enslaved Africans arrived in the shores of Point Comfort, Virginia, and 1620 was the year of the Mayflower Compact being written. And with that, in the Mayflower Compact, the Pilgrims talked about how they wanted to come to this nation for 3 reasons: to glorify God, honor their king and country, and advance the Christian faith. This was a very clearly laid out. And yet, at the same time, they were enslaving human beings. The vast majority of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were enslavers themselves. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. Thomas Jefferson was the greatest, had the largest numbers of enslaved of all of the American presidents. And the last president to grow up in a home with the enslaved was Woodrow Wilson, so all the way into the 1900s. And so in that way, it is very difficult, although I am a firm believer in the promise of America, it is so difficult to separate that promise of equality, that promise of justice, that promise of freedom that we're about to celebrate next week on the 4th of July, and reconcile that with the reality. George Washington clearly was a man that wanted to serve his country, not himself. And yet George Washington was the second largest slave owner of all the American presidents. And so that, for me, and I think, Gina, what happens is that it makes people believe less in these promises and hopes. And it makes them then look at politics as transactional. Why should I care about these great principles if even the founding fathers did not actually live up to them?
Well, I want Jesse to speak to that, if you would.
I just want to comment on to associate myself with everything that Ted said. That not only were the first 15 presidents either did nothing about slavery or they simply kicked the can down the road until the 16th president. The first 6 were part of an experiment, part of a movement where the presidency itself was to be an institution where the American people would elect someone of high character, high moral character. And from the founding fathers' point of view, they believed that moral impetus, that moral motivation, that moral space came somewhere between David and Jesus. They put it in the Constitution by function. The young kid, the army, the slingshot, that slew Goliath became the commander of an army and a militia. And according to Matthew chapter 1, verse 17, and the repriever partner, the forgiver of men, the granter of mercy and grace. Two diametrically opposed idea, an army commander and a forgiver of men? You mean someone who can command an army and someone who can pardon insurrectionists? Wait a minute. These are two opposite concepts. So they're really not two job responsibilities. It's 28 generations between David and Jesus. And they believed, they called it the finger of God, that every American president would be elected in a lineage that functioned in the lineage of David for all of the American people. That's what they did. First six presidents understood that, and the concept was lost. And so when we the people vote now, do we vote for someone of this character, of this magnitude, of this magnanimity, or do we vote for my guy who's advancing my personal interest? Are we voting for someone to build a more perfect union, who sees the least of these, who sees the stranger by the Jericho road, who sees the woman by the well, who has discerned and given serious reflectivity, Gina, to the idea that character matters in the highest office in the land? And my sense is that we've gotten away from that as much as we have become selfish into our own ideas, our own ideology, and we don't see ourselves as a single people. I'm deeply, deeply, deeply troubled by that. And at some point in time, we're going to have this conversation that it is clear that the spirit energy of the nation emanates from a single office.
Absolutely.
It may be a big old White House. It may be something that Democrats have occupied and Republicans have occupied. When I first showed my work, Gina, to Cornel West many, many years ago during the COVID, in fact, he said, when I drew a Vitruvian figure and called this person the commander of the army and militia and the repriever partner, and I walked him through the first, at that time, 44, 45, 46 presidents of the United States, and I showed him this artwork of this figure, Cornel West said, "Well, who is that, Jesse?" After understanding the concept, I said, "It's someone, Ted, that we haven't seen yet. It's someone who hasn't come into existence yet." We've had now 47 examples of what the expectation was on day one, but we've not seen this person yet. It's a man, it's a woman, it's a form, but we've not seen this spirit energy come into being in a way that can bring people together, where we turn to each other and not on each other, where we love our neighbors as ourselves. Gina, that's what I got for you.
So let me jump back in on it, because there are certain things that, let's take Benjamin Franklin, for example. During the course of the writing of the Constitution, and by the time they got to the convention, Franklin was convinced that no man should own another man, and therefore he biblically, in a sense, said, let these people go. Let me free these people and give them something to get started on their way. And then, of course, the Adams family, John Adams and John Quincy Adams, they did not believe in it. They did not own slaves. And so, I often think they came into a situation that had been in existence for 150 years when they wrote the Constitution, but they were students of the Lord's Prayer that said, on earth as it is in heaven. And so I hate that we're going to run out of time. I think this is something that we want to reflect on. I will even ask people, to maybe study this whole thing out as we come back to talk about this on another occasion, because I do believe that it is worth fighting for. I don't know if Marcus Garvey is, my route right now. Whether or not deportation will eventually get to all Black and brown people in the United States, I don't know. But I have a lot of friends who have moved to Mexico, who are looking at moving back to, well, not back to, because they never lived in Africa, but going to Africa and assuming their rightful heritage, if you will. But America is our rightful heritage. We helped to build this thing. And so I want to be able to have the two or three of us look at this again and discuss it a little bit more, because we are in a fight.
Gina, congratulations. This is your first official show on Fat Meets Fridays. We only have about 10 seconds left. Ted, thank you for being Gina's guest, being my guest on this show. Gina, a 10-second thought.
A 10-second thought is, I think that hope is still alive. We can never lose faith. We can never lose hope. But the greatest of those is love.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You've been listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. We'll see you again next week.